Welcome to BioSignals, the podcast powered by BioCrossroads, where we decode the pulse of Indiana's life sciences sector. Each episode, we bring you the innovators, breakthroughs, and bold ideas shaping the future of health and science. Welcome to BioSignals, the podcast powered by BioCrossroads. I'm your co-host, Nathan Brown, and before we get to our conversation with Vince Wong, President and CEO of BioCrossroads, I'd like to take a moment to remind listeners about why we started this podcast. So we started this podcast to open the door to conversations shaping Indiana's life sciences ecosystem and to let you hear directly from the people driving those conversations. Over the past 2 decades, Indiana has grown into a global life sciences powerhouse through research, innovation, and deep connectivity. When BioCrossroads was launched in 2002, we stepped into an ecosystem with tremendous potential. This podcast continues that work by sharing the stories, insights, and ideas behind Indiana's next chapter in life sciences. With that said, our guest today is Christy Wright. She is the president and CEO of AgriNovus Indiana. Christy and AgriNovus are at the intersection of food, agriculture, and life sciences, work that closely aligns with what we do here at BioCrossroads and also the One Health approach to connecting human, animal, and plant health together. Our organizations are strengthening Indiana's innovation ecosystem by supporting startups, advancing research, and driving real-world impact. So let's listen into the conversation between Christy Wright and Vince Wong.
Well, I'd like to welcome our guest here, Christy Wright, who's President and CEO of AgriNovus. Welcome, Christy. Great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Why don't we start off, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the journey that brought you here to AgriNovus, Indiana.
Well, I am a Hoosier. I grew up in Fort Wayne, and I grew up in a family that really valued purpose. And I remember at a young age, my parents telling my siblings and I, whatever you do, it needs to be in service of something greater than yourself. Okay. And it's a great message. But as a kid, you're kind of left there thinking, what in the world am I going to do?
Yeah.
So I went to school at IU. And I studied nonprofit management and public affairs, so I tried to take that very literally. Started my career in that space. And then I had a few really, I would say, perspective-changing experiences on medical mission trips with my dad in food insecure communities. And so that, when I came back from that, I decided to recruit myself into agriculture because I thought, I want to be part of an industry that helps feed and nourish the world. And to me, that greater purpose is really compelling. So I recruited myself into ag and Dow AgriSciences at the time, which later became Corteva. Worked there for 15 years in the commercial business, and then eventually in the global business was leading their food systems team. But this opportunity to come to AgriNovus came up, and I thought, this feels like a great melding of this sort of purpose and service, nonprofit, serving the sector that I care so much about, and the state, which has given so much to me and which I feel passionately about too. So that's a little bit about how I got to this place.
Yeah, no, I love that kind of origin story of your why and how that has brought you to AgriNovus, Indiana, and now you're 6 months into the job? Is that about right?
Almost, yeah, I'm almost. And I like how you said, I like how you mentioned origin story and knowing your why. One of the things that's been striking to me about the AgriNovus team, which I know is true of the BioCrossroads team, is the why and the purpose is so foundational to the reason people are here.
Absolutely.
And it's so fun to work with people who are like-minded in that regard in service of that broader mission.
Share with our audience what does AgriNovus Indiana, what's your mission and what's your purpose, and how do you go about doing that work?
AgriNovus exists to advance the agbioscience economy in Indiana. So I know you know this, Vince, but it's been reinforced to me many times since I've been here how important it was. The founding leaders of AgriNovus made a decision about our scope and basically decided to bring together 5 platform economies in agriculture. So where a lot of people think when they think of ag, they think only of ag production. When we talk about agbioscience, we're talking about the 5 platform economies of agriculture production, yes, but also ag tech and equipment,
Got it.
value-added food and nutrition, crop science and crop health, and animal health as well. So when you take all of those together, this is a sector that contributes $72 billion to our state's economy. We employ 147,000 Hoosiers. And so I think back often on Beth Bechtel and Libby Fritz and the founding board members and the insight that they had to really catalyze the sector to come together and to work together to advance the economy and the sector here.
Yeah, that's great. And through our collaboration, I've learned a lot about. You've helped me learn a lot about kind of the value chain, and you've really have leveraged your industry experience to bring that domain knowledge. Talk to me a little bit about more about those platforms, which I think represent the value chain, right? And how Indiana is positioned along that entire value chain, and maybe to highlight a little bit some of the assets in each piece of those value chain that maybe creates differentiation for us as an ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, a lot of us, food arrives at the grocery store or at the restaurant or even at home, and we don't really think much about all of the people that have had a hand in bringing it to us. And so the agri-food value chain in particular it's long and somewhat complicated. And it's also been evolving because of various market dynamics. But it really starts with the innovation that companies like Corteva and others in that space are doing. They're innovating the seeds and the crop inputs that farmers need to raise healthy crops. And those are then those technologies are delivered to agricultural retailers or distributors. They make it to the farmer. The farmer, of course, grows the seeds, and then from there, it kind of moves into what we kind of consider the food marketplace. So they're delivering to packers and processors, or they're delivering directly to their customers. Innovation gets added along each step. All the way to the food company and then to the consumer. We are an I state. We like to brag about that. Indiana, Iowa, and Illinois are kings of agriculture in Indiana.
I love that.
Yes, and so we have in Indiana, we've got about 14 million acres. Of our 23 million acres of land in Indiana, 14 plus are in working lands.
Wow.
So we have a lot, and we are a top 5 state in producing corn and soybeans, in mint. We also have the number 2 producer of watermelons in the United States, which is down in Knox County. We're also a leading producer of beef and some aspects of poultry. So we have so much leadership in production, but then we also have differentiation in value-added food and nutrition.
Right.
Well, we manufacture a lot of that here.
Yeah.
Northeast Indiana is a great example of that. We also have a region called the Kirksey region that does a fair bit of production and manufacturing. So we have some nice opportunity and differentiation there. But I also want to put a shout out to the innovation community that's here as well. And what's really coming out of various founders and startups that is also being adopted across the value chain. So lots of opportunities.
Yeah, a really robust ecosystem that you help lead and galvanize, which is awesome. Last November, we had opportunity to collaborate and host a summit at the beautiful new headquarters of Elanco Animal Science over in the One Health Innovation District, and really had the opportunity to really shine a light on the One Health economy. And so, there's a lot of definitions about One Health. If you Google One Health, you'll get, a bunch of different definitions. But in your perspective and from your words, how would you describe One Health, and how does that relate to Indiana?
Well, first, it was a pleasure to collaborate, and thank you for allowing us to participate in your BioCrossroads Summit. We thought the One Health Summit was a great success. Felt a little bit like capturing lightning in a bottle with the characters that we all had on stage there.
Absolutely.
Together and having those really compelling dialogues. So the way that we think about One Health is is that it's really the intersection of plant, animal, and human health. And when we think about it in an agricultural context, especially agri-food context, we also think about food as a nexus in all of those domains. And so it's really that intersectional space, and we think there's so much opportunity, and that's also why it's been really fun from a career standpoint, to be able to be collaborating with BioCrossroads in this space.
Mhm. What I think is really interesting is this concept that you talk a lot about is food is health. Talk to me about more about what does that mean? I think we all as humans eat, and so we understand kind of intuitively that what we eat can impact how we feel. But maybe talk. I'm sure the food of health. There's much more kind of nuance and sophistication around that. Share with us about what that means and what it is going to mean in a couple of years from now, and what is industry doing to really help fulfill that promise?
Well, I think that, when we zoom out and look at the dynamics affecting our sector right now, there are things happening within agriculture, a lot of disruptive forces, even related to climate and weather. It's getting harder to grow crops. Farmers are being very challenged, even from a financial resilience standpoint. They're dealing with a lot of things like tariffs and things that are just challenging their operations. But outside of the direct ag production challenges and dynamics, we're also seeing how some things that are happening in the food sector are impacting our growers upstream and also impacting consumers. So if you look at GLPs, for example, GLP-1s, they are materially impacting consumer diets. They're impacting basket size at the grocery store. They're impacting calorie intake, and that is changing what groceries are looking to offer, what restaurants, what food manufacturers are even putting in their portfolios. We're also noticing the impacts of, or the interest in the science around ultra-processed foods and its potential connection into chronic disease. And then there's changes in the healthcare industry. You know much better than me, but at least what we see and notice from our sector is that the business models, the kind of shift in interest to the social determinants of health,
Right.
the upstream determinants of health, nutrition and food. I mean, agriculture plays a key role there. So what we think is an opportunity for us is, especially in this intersectional space, is how can we innovate crops, crop inputs? How can we innovate along the value chain to create healthier food that ultimately impacts the consumer in a positive way?
In the kind of classical but traditional life science world, when we think about medicines and when companies get approval from the FDA and they're then able to make indications or claims around the benefits that the particular therapy or device might have for a patient, then there's some pretty rigorous clinical studies and approval processes related to being able to have those claims from the FDA. Do you foresee down the road that potentially food companies are going to engage in clinical studies to be able to make similar claims or indications of health benefits of the food that they are producing and selling to consumers?
Possibly. I mean, those are the sorts of things that are being discussed right now in our sector. And it's interesting because it's happening kind of at different points in the chain, not just the actual crop, but there's nascent science emerging around how crop production practices affect the overall nutritional content of a crop. Especially a lot of interest around regenerative ag practices. What does that? Can we see a connection there between those practices and the ultimate composition of that crop from a nutrition standpoint? I was with some growers in the Kankakee Iroquois region just on Friday, who were telling me that their customers are asking more and more about nutritional composition of what they're delivering. They're actually needing some of the expertise that we have here in our state and in our ecosystem more frequently to answer those questions to their buyers. So I do think that those claims are important. I think we're seeing a little bit of a pendulum swing. For a while, there were a lot of absence claims in food, grown, non-GMO, for example, is one, or grown without X input.
Right.
Now we're starting to see more of the claims around, nutrition and fortification and things like that. So that's another indication that I think we're headed in that direction.
Yeah.
You're listening to BioSignals, the podcast powered by BioCrossroads. Now, let's listen to more from Christy.
I think one thing that excites me about One Health too is this intersectionality of capabilities that transcend animal, plant, and human health. A lot of platform technologies, for example, whether it be analytical platforms, if you reel back the time of 15, 20 years ago, sequencing, for instance, really first took hold in animal and plant science and then later got human applications. And I think a lot of technologies are similar, and especially in this life science tools space. And I think that creates even greater possibilities given who we have in our ecosystem with Corteva and Elanco and Lilly all here, and being able to share expertise. As we think about, the need to attract and retain talent to our region, how do you think having the constellation of leaders in animal, plant, and human health in our community would help with regard to recruiting and retaining talent that might be considering to come to Indiana?
Well, I think what we have here is really unique. And it's reinforced every time we have conversations that bring together our boards, for example, or bring together our sectors. And so I think us telling that story, which is something we're working on together, I think will be huge in terms of establishing an identity from an economic development standpoint that will be compelling for people. I like the point you're making also about the kind of the foundational science and the underpinnings that are common in our sectors and across plant, animal, and human science. I think that it creates a translation, that we're starting to see percolate. I think people are realizing they can move across our sectors, and that their expertise enables them, to make those moves. Plus, I think, a lot of it's being driven by AI and data, and the capabilities we have here from that standpoint are also great and growing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I've seen, even folks in my professional network have gone and from a pharmaceutical company, they may have a regulatory expertise, and they've gone from, a pharmaceutical company, and they've gone to an animal science company, and because some of that commonality of functional expertise that's applicable across these different otherwise considered separate domains, but really that translational skill set that goes beyond these silos, which I think is great for talent attraction, that people can come to Indiana and know that they can have multiple opportunities to progress in their career if, for some reason, the first employer might not work out. So
yeah, agree. I thought it was interesting. You and I were in a conversation yesterday, I think, and we were talking about this intersection, and one of our stakeholders was saying that the intersection, especially in the scientific and clinical space, is real. At the same time, our sectors have unique business models.
yes,
There's uniqueness related to the market dynamics and to the VCs, and so there's a lot of beauty and opportunity in these, our initiatives, especially working side by side to leverage the intersection, make sure that our ecosystems are benefiting from it, while also offering the very specific needs that our sectors continue to have that are unique to those.
absolutely. When you think about the three I's, Illinois, Iowa, and Indiana, what sets Indiana apart from these other leaders in ag bioscience?
Great question. So we are all three are big producers of corn and soybeans. One of the things that's really unique about Indiana is that we can grow specialty crops here. And so I mentioned watermelon earlier. We're also in the top 2 in mint.
Oh,
We are great pumpkin growers.
interesting.
Southwest Indiana, in particular, is rich in specialty crops,
Mm.
and so we've got a really interesting kind of, if in your mind's eye, map of specialty regions. Southwest being specialty crops. We've got a lot of seed production in the kind of central Indiana region. We have poultry and livestock northeast, as well as corn and soybeans. And then we've got corn, soybeans, livestock, and some other unique crops like mint and popcorn, which we're also
Right.
we're number 1 up in that northwest area. So we've got we've got a unique ability here to serve all of those markets, really, and to innovate for all those markets too, and to test them right here, test new products and new innovation right in our state without having to go beyond our borders.
Talk to me a little about the collaborations that exist in our state between industry and universities, and maybe what role AgriNovus Indiana plays to facilitate and foster those collaborations.
Well, so we see ourselves as a kind of a bridge within our ecosystem in the agbioscience sector. And so our job is to really make sure that our ecosystem is connecting and that folks are getting their needs met, even through the resources that we have here. That collaboration happens across, from the startup space all the way across to the very large companies. And also, we're blessed to have our R1 universities here in the state, as well as a thriving, middle size and smaller university um, uh, environment. I think the other thing that's important to agriculture that we have here is logistics and the ability to manufacture and move what's produced here. So all those things together result in lots of collaboration that happens, and we take pride in our ability to help make those connections.
Yeah, that's great. And I think another thing that I hopefully will serve as a additional catalyst for the ag bioscience economy here is, the fund that we've helped raise together, right? The Crossroads Health Ventures that we've just launched in the last couple weeks, and great to have Corteva and Elanco as strategic partners in that fund. Talk to me about, what maybe some opportunities or challenges founders and startups in ag bioscience face here in Indiana, and what services or support does AgriNovus Indiana provide to help support their growth and acceleration?
Well, AgriNovus has a program called Velocity, which is an accelerator. It's an industry-led initiative, and so basically it's a 6-month program. We start it by issuing research in 3 categories that we run the program in, which are food as health, bioinnovation, and farmer-focused innovation. And so we're able to provide some insight to founders on what the ecosystem, and especially what other companies in Indiana are seeing as key needs that will help inform them as it relates to the problems to solve.
Yeah, that's great.
And then we provide kind of this 6-month accelerator, connecting to the ecosystem, some kind of mentoring along the way, and then that culminates in awards at the end of the 6 months, $25,000 awards in each of those categories. So it's a great way to help those founders along their path, not only from the financial perspective, but also making sure that they are navigating the path and
Sure.
being supported on their journey.
Yeah, awesome. We are winding down our conversation, and the last question that we ask every guest, Christy, is, what is 1 or 2 innovations that you see coming down the road that you think is going to be pretty transformational or disruptive for your particular business or sector?
Gosh, it's hard to pick one, Vince. I think that if I can cheat and go on to 2. So
Yes, we'll give you 2.
okay. So I do think that gene editing is a really important, an important technology in agriculture, and what that will do for for the speed of breeding and also the kind, to address the biggest challenges that we have as a society, helping growers manage, the challenges that they have on farm, also making sure that we're evolving to meet the needs of consumer diets. So that's one. The second one that I was literally just talking with someone about this today. And it's not so much that I think it's going to be necessarily disruptive, but or a big bet. But one of the biggest challenges that farmers have is labor. And so what we're seeing in the robotics space, we were just talking about Tesla Optimus, is that what it's called? I can't remember, the humanoid robot. There's starting to be discussion in the sector about what could that mean for labor, for harvest, for some of the ag production needs. So those are a couple that I think are interesting, and but so much is happening, and it's just such an exciting time to be in the sector and to be close to innovation, and to help it find its way.
So you're saying that in a couple of years, we'll be driving down the interstate and look across to the farmlands or the croplands and see robots out there.
It's possible.
Right?
It's
Picking sunflower up.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What a great conversation, Christy. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed partnering with you, and thank you for everything you're doing to lead AgriNovus Indiana going forward, and look forward to future collaboration. But thanks for joining us on BioSignals today.
Thank you so much, Vince. Appreciate it.
For more information about BioCrossroads, our events, programs, and how you can get involved, please visit biocrossroads.com.